So you're gearing up for your OP10 pre-release, ready to take home that winner Buggy, get your Buggy deck all loaded up, or maybe, just maybe, this is your first pre-release, maybe even your first time playing the One Piece trading card game at a store. And so you're wondering to yourself either way, whether a new player or an old player, how can I set myself up for the best success at my pre-release? What should I be looking out for, and how can I take home some wins? Well, I have won over 50% of my sealed events in the One Piece card game, whether they've been sealed battles or pre-releases. So today, I'm going to give you the tips and tricks you need to know to take home some wins at your OP10 pre-release. This is my OP10 pre-release guide. If you want to win this, you'll play this. These are the things you'll learn in this guide: how a pre-release is played, the most optimal choices you can make beforehand, cards to look out for when building your deck, or they can be played against you, and understanding the card pool and gameplay environment of this set. Now, disclaimer, everything I'm giving you in this guide is to give you the most optimal, highest power level version of what you want to play. But if at any point you suggest something and you think to yourself, that doesn't sound very fun, or it's not really why I like playing the One Piece trading card game, just disregard it. Do what feels fun to you. But try to incorporate as many of these other tips and things I talk about in this video so that you can have the best, most optimal version of that play experience you're looking for. So how is a pre-release played? Well, each player will receive 6 booster packs of the newest set, in this case OP10 Royal Bloodlines, and 1 2-card stamped promo pack. You'll open your packs, and using what you pull, you'll construct a 40-card deck. Your deck may contain cards of any color regardless of the color of your leader, but the color and card type still matters for card effects. So for example, cards like OP10's Buggy can still only search red event cards. Or cards that require a subtype to either target, activate, or search still require that card type. For example, in this set, there are a few cards that require you having a Dressrosa or Supernova type leader. And then if a Rainbow Luffy leader isn't being provided, you must bring your own leader. If you play a sealed event after release, you can bring any leader from this set you already own. But you can't bring one typically to a pre-release that you pulled from another pre-release, since for many people, it'll be the first time opening packs. You must also be responsible for bringing your own 10-card Dawn deck. Please remember this is the one thing people forget all the time. Or play with a leader from the set that you pull from your packs. Now, like I mentioned here, there are a few small differences in how pre-releases can be ran, whether using Rainbow Luffy leaders, open leaders, etc. Since stores typically cater to what's the best thing for their event and for their local player base. So I always recommend that once you've chosen where you're going to go pre-release at, make sure to call or message them ahead of time and ask them exactly what you need to know about their event and what you need to bring with you. Now, while the standard has been bringing your own leader for sealed events, in the last few events, stores have been provided Rainbow Luffys and have been distributing them for all players to use, similar to sealed battles. My opinion is that the current meta when it comes to sealed event leaders is so high rolly and lacking of a lot of skill depth that the sealed event used to have, that Rainbow Luffy is definitely the most optimal and fun way for both a competitive and casual experience. But if your store isn't providing Rainbow Luffys, here are the leaders I would suggest using. The best leader in all of Sealed right now is Sanji. Red Sanji has the once per turn ability to give a character without an on-play effect rush as long as it costs 8 or less. With this, you're smashing face every turn with at least 2 characters, your Sanji leader and the character you play, which is extremely scary whenever you get your opponent down to 0 life. Even 1 life with a small hand can be a lethal point, considering you're always going to have 2 attacks. Because these cards immediately hit the board and start attacking, winning the die roll is super important with this card because it means as long as you curve out first, you're going to be super ahead. And whereas when Jewelry Bonnie was the strongest leader in Sealed, there was this skill set needing of understanding the card pool and timing to make sure you weren't bluffed into bad activations, as well as making sure your activations were timed when holding up Dawn rather than turns you should be tapping out to resolve higher density threats. What makes Sanji broken is pretty surface level, and even a higher skill player can get absolutely high rolled by their opponent just winning the die roll and having a better streamline of cards. The best Jewelry Bonnie sealed players cannot beat the average or below average player on Red Sanji that just plays a card, activates, and rushes in every single turn. And this is why I'm also saying that Rainbow Luffy is now dominantly the more fun leader to play with and more competitive for all players. On the S tier is Jewelry Bonnie, who lets you pay a Dawn when your opponent declares an attack once per turn to rest a character or leader. This lets you set up targets for attacks, remove blockers, or just remove the number of attackers hitting your face that turn. Green Yellow Yamato, of course, has double attacks, so able to really glass cannon you, especially when a set doesn't have a lot of cheap blockers, or 2k counters. In the A tier is Roronoa Zoro, who helps you go really wide and can go all the way up to an S tier leader for sure when we have a lot of cheap threats coming out in a set that we can really go wide with. Shanks gives you a free counter every turn, and in certain sets gets you a bunch of subtype advantages for having a red hair pirates leader. Katakuri swings for 7k and gives you life manipulation for you and your opponent, and Eustace Captain Cade lets you attack twice in a turn to help pressure board, even from nothing, or go for game. Finally, in the B tier are leaders you can play to some success, but typically won't win the event unless the set is very, very specific. Red Green Law, for example, needs a bunch of good cheap cards to play and a high density of 5-cost cards to cheat out. NL wants to have a lot of triggers to really start rolling through life, and Sanji wants something like a vanilla sub-theme. But as long as you're sleeving up any of these leaders, you should be able to have a fun time. Now, some things to remember about Sealed that are different from playing Constructed. In Sealed, your opponent will typically have less 2k counters than normal. This means swinging for 6k is more effective at dealing damage and getting cards out of your opponent's hands than in Constructed, because they'll need 2 1ks every time you swing for over 1,000, and they're missing those extra 2k counters. And with being down more cards through countering, card advantage being less accessible is even more backbreaking. Playing Searchers is far more of a risk in these decks, which aren't fully stacked and don't even have the full set of Searchers. So your opponent typically will have less resources to leverage at any time. Triggers are far more likely to be seen in Sealed. Because of there being no color restriction, any decent trigger typically makes the deck, so be aware of your non-yellow opponents having triggers. We'll review how many relevant ones there are in this set coming up. Power reduction is also a premium in Sealed. You're more times than not fighting over board presence to win the game. So being able to reduce the power on your opponent's units to remove them from the board by having more efficient attacks is super valuable. So here are the cards you should always be including in your deck when you pull them to make your base build. On-rate vanilla cards that cost 3 or greater. On-rate vanillas cost 3 or greater. These are cards that have power that's 2,000 more than the cost. For example, a 3-cost character with 5,000 power, or a 6-cost character with 8,000 power. Any cards that are 2k counters. We just talked about it, but you really need every single one. Blockers are also invaluable to short with 2k counters and really get in the way of those late game bombs. Any event that gives you at least 2k counter per cost must be played. For example, if a counter event costs 2 and gives you 4k counter. This has helped shore up the lack of 2ks in your deck. Any well-priced interaction will also make your deck. Cards that KO, power reduce, bottom deck, return cards to hand, freeze, or rest your opponent's characters. And triggers as long as they're also good on board or a good counter. Now here are the stats in this card pool for relevant card types. For 2k counters, there are 7 that are rare and above, and 10 that are under rare. For blockers, there are 5 that are rare or above, and 7 under rare. Free play characters have 1 rare or above, and 6 that are under rare. And there are 0 characters with rush that are rare or above, but 2 that are under rare. When it comes to removal pieces, cards that make other characters leave the board, there are 8 that are rare or above and 6 under rare. Cards that rest have 2 rares or above and 5 under rare. This set has 0 cards that freeze your opponent's leaders or characters. And there are 3 good triggers rare or above and 8 under rare. And finally, for cards that power reduce, specifically proactive ones that work on your turn offensively and not on your opponent's turn defensively, there are 2 that are rare or above and 2 that are under rare. Now let's review some standout cards specifically for Sealed in OP10. For a full set review for Sealed, I'll be having a live stream coming up later this week. And if you're looking for a full set review of OP10 for Constructed, we already have those videos up on the channel per color. And thank you to our members for supporting this channel and getting this and other content up to 2 weeks early, as well as other members' benefits. First is Smiley, a 5/6 with on play. If your leader has the Punk Hazard type, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3,000 power during this turn. Now this only works with the Rainbow Luffy, but when it does, it has a lethal body that brings free large power reduction on top of it. 3k is nothing to scoff at. You're basically playing this for 2 at that point. And this card's only a rare, so you'll see a bunch of these running around with there being Luffy leaders. Now, in addition to that, there is this 7-cost Caesar Clown, which is a 7/7 with on play. Look at the top 5 cards and reveal a Smiley and add it to hand. Then, whether or not you found one, you place the rest of the cards at the bottom of the deck, and you can play a Smiley that's in your hand. So if you didn't find one but already have one, you just put it onto the board. The Caesar Clown isn't uncommon, so there'll be a lot more Caesars running around than the Smileys, but you're likely to see the Smiley show up as long as your opponent is running the Caesar, which seems pretty valid, and especially again, if the ability is turned on by having the Rainbow Luffy leader. 10 Layered Igloo is a fantastic counter card. It converts the 2.5k counter per Dawn spent, with you reducing one of your opponent's leaders or characters by 2,000 while buffing one of your own by 3,000. This can also be split between your card currently in combat and one of your opponent's cards that isn't the current attacker to invalidate 2 attacks in 1 turn. And this card is a common, so it's going to be everywhere and you need to remember how to play around it, as well as make sure you just play every copy you pull. Gum Gum UFO is a 2-cost main event that generates 4 to 5 Dawn worth of power for just 2 cost. For the main, you reduce something by 4,000 power, and then if you have 2 or less life cards, up to one of your leaders or characters gets 1,000 power for the turn. And since the 4,000 power is a reduction on your opponent's target, you actually get 4 Dawn every single time you swing into that target if they defend it from an attack, since putting 4 Dawn on just their first attack wouldn't translate to the second one at all. It's an extremely good value, and it also has a removal trigger that KOs up to one of your opponent's characters with 3,000 power or less. So at uncommon, and this ability to really help take down massive late game characters with smaller units, you're going to want to have this card, and make sure you don't expose your own units to this card as well. Divine Departure is of course the most flexible card printed to the One Piece card game since Reject, and luckily not as broken. For 1 cost, it generates 3k counter for 1 Dawn, but you can also pay an additional 5 to use it as a main event that KOs up to one of your opponent's characters with 8,000 power or less. This means you can KO a vanilla static character at equal cost of 6, or something that costs greater that usually has less power per cost. This card is another one that's only for Rainbow Luffy. I only remember to put the asterisks here for some reason, and not on the smiley. But Isho is a 5/6 when on play if your leader has the Navy type. Rest of the 2 of your opponent's characters will cost 5 or less. It's really good for opening up the board by removing blockers, or setting up really good attacks when your opponent wanted to force you into attacking their life and giving them cards. Plus, it sticks around as a really good sized body. This Odyssey Edward Newgate looks for rested cards to turn on its ability. It's both a lethal body, and it rests a cost 5 or less character your opponent controls, and then KOs up to one of the rested 3 or less cost characters if you have 2 or more rested characters when you play it. This means it can rest a target for attacking that's 5 cost, or rest a blocker to stop it from blocking, and then remove either the small blocker or remove a cheaper attacker from earlier in the game without wasting one of your swings on it. And at common, you're sure to see him around. NL is another lethal body with the Odyssey type, looking for 2 or more rested cards when he's on played, but he lets you draw 3 cards and trash 2 cards. So he's a 5/6 body that will be able to replace himself and sculpt your hand for more interaction. Yes, you do have to usually play this off your 5 Dawn turn so you can get the ability, but when you look at it as sculpting your hand, you're going to play it for 5 with 3 to 5 more Dawn up, and sculpt your hand for the perfect secondary card to play, or for the event card you want to hold up on your opponent's turn for a counter. The weak do not have a right to choose how they die is of course a great KO event that costs 5 and can be activated for main or counter. The KO would cost 7 or less, and at common you're going to see this dude everywhere, so please remember it exists. Radio Knife is the most crazy efficient interaction probably in this whole set. It is a 4-cost main event that removes a blocker and sets up an attack with the first part that rests a character 6 or less, and then lets you KO up to one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 5 or less. So you can rest the first part and then KO it if it's 5 or less, or you can rest the target you want to attack to or remove, and then KO something that's already rested that you really want to KO. And if that wasn't enough, it also has a great trigger that rests an opponent's character with a cost of 4 or less. Seriously, this might just be the greatest value card in all of Sealed for this set. Please remember it exists because, again, it's a rare, you might not see it yourself, but it will absolutely blow you out. Cavendish is like literally the perfect templated body of what we want for a sealed card. It's a 4/6, so it's vanilla statted, and when it's attacking once per turn, you draw 2 cards and trash 1 card from your hand, meaning on the first activation, it replaces itself, and every time after that, it's going to get you card advantage, all while sculpting your hand. Marco is a 3/5 that's also vanilla statted, so a great early game attacker that can then shift into a blocker later in the game when its attacks really aren't doing much and you want to protect specific bodies. Plus, when it's KO'd, whether your opponent attacks it or you block with it, you get to return one of your opponent's characters cost 4 or less to their hand, either getting a blocker off the board or removing an additional attacker. Again, this guy is a limited all-star. Definitely got to play him. He's going to be more on the face. Your opponent probably won't open you up and blow you out by randomly playing one at one point, for the most part. But yeah, definitely just remember he's around and definitely play your copies. Barrier Pistol is the best version of Jet Pistol we've ever had in Sealed, i.e. because Jet Pistol has never been in Sealed, it's a starter deck card. It's a 5-cost main event that bottom decks a 6,000 power character or less with trigger activate the main effect. The removal is great because it bottom decks, which is completely removing it from the game in terms of how Sealed is normally played, and it's a common, so you're going to see this guy everywhere. Beware of triggering this thing, it will absolutely dream crush you. Now, God Thread is removal that doesn't really trade up the cost for the Dawn paid for it. It's a 5 cost thing that can only kill a 5 cost thing, but it then ramps you 1 Dawn active from your deck. So this card is amazing on curve because it will jump you half a turn ahead, as well as let you swing for 6 with your leader if you play it on your 5 Dawn curve. And removing the body and getting some extra resource will start generating extra resources by what it plucks out of your opponent's hand, turn over turn, really putting you ahead in a way that doesn't feel like it's impactful, but trust me, certainly is. But the later you go into the game, the more value you typically lose off it, so definitely don't lean on it as a be-all, end-all removal piece. But if you do curve out onto this on your 5 Dawn turn or your 6 Dawn turn, and you already especially have a character that's stuck on board, you're going to be doing pretty damn well. Little Black Bears trade slight counter power for the Dawn cost for the ability of replacing itself. For 3 Dawn counter, you get to give a leader or character 4,000 power for the battle, but then if you have 7 or more Dawn on your field and 5 or less cards in your hand, you draw a card, which is not a hard hand size to be around for sealed. Again, card efficiency and card advantage is not that high, so you should typically be able to just cycle this for a free card while countering for 4k, which is going to really mess up your opponent's counter math. And with it being common, you know you're going to see these played everywhere. Ryuma is a vanilla stat at 4/6, and obviously we're going to play these because of the body, but the double attack is icing on the cake because, like I said, we are typically looking to battle over board most of the game when possible. So that means when the board is fully controlled and it's time to start trying to close out the game before your opponent can pull back into it, you can use the double attack to quickly null out their life. And if you're playing with leaders of your choice, this card is an insane sniper with Sanji where you play it out of nowhere and just double attack. With uncommon, this guy will certainly be around, so make sure to prepare for it, especially against those Sanji leaders. And if you didn't know, Liberation is not leader locked and is the absolute comfort behind removal for this seal. It 2-for-1s the opponent straight up. So with the main, I'm going to read this one through exactly. If the number of your characters is at least 2 less than the number of your opponent's characters, KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a base cost of 6 or less, and up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a base cost of 4 or less. With trigger, negate the effect up to 1 of your opponent's leader or characters during this turn. That part, little less useful. It probably won't really matter. But this is good in so many ways. First of all, if you're playing taller singular bodies instead of going wide, it will be active more times than not compared to your opponent, allowing you to play that strategy and reinforce it by not letting you chip away with a wide board. You can also secretly have this come out of nowhere by letting your opponent kill things on their turns to set up the condition of being 2 less, or blocking with bodies. So your opponent may enter a turn not ready for a liberation on the follow-up, but then through the combat steps you take of not defending or defending with blockers, you've now turned on liberation and are about to nuke their board. Basil Hawkins is also a crazy efficient card for sealed. It's a 4/5 1k counter with on KO trash up to 1 card over the top of your opponent's life and trigger draw 2 trash 1. What this basically means is that as long as you resolve this thing and they don't bounce it to your hand or bottom deck it with a gum barrier, you're going to get a free card from your opponent's life. Or they just have to ignore it and keep giving you cards from their hand every time you attack leader. Either way, you resolve this on curve and you are guaranteed value. I mean, even just removing it with the barrier and stuff is way better than just removing it with an attack and getting no trash life, so we are super happy to take that trade. Then there's Room. This is the 1 cost that can counter for 3k, but only works when you're at 1 or less life. It also lets you unrest a character, letting you block again, or removing a character from being attacked down. It's not always going to be online, which is a huge risk, but with what it does for so cheap, I felt like I needed to mention it as an uncommon because I could totally see this being a blowout card in matchups, especially with the tempo of sealed and with Sanji leaders trying to get any advantage when they're just rushing down back and forth on the opponent's boards. And then there's Damned Punk, a 4-cost main event that can remove a character with 1 cost over what you're paying, being a 5-cost character or less. You also get to look at the top card of you or your opponent's life cards and put it on top or bottom, so you get a little bit of information, a little bit of life manipulation on top of already being a KO card, and then has trigger draw 2 trash 1. It's sort of like God Thread where like it gets less advantage the later you go in the game, but getting that really nice life look and having a better trigger definitely brings it up the curve a little bit for how good it is throughout the breadth of the game, whereas God Thread is better on the 5-cost turn. I also always want to review the secrets for the set since they're less likely to show up but always impactful in what they do. So this is a 6/7 Luffy 1k counter. With once per turn, this character cannot be KO'd by an opponent's card effects, making him really sticky and sealed. And it has a when attacking, you may place 3 cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck in any order. And if your opponent has 5 or more cards in their hand, they will have to trash 1 from their hand. This is really important because, again, we don't have a lot of card advantage in sealed. So you're going to want every little snipe card you can for free. And this bottom decking 3 from your trash is literally no cost. There is no trash recursion happening in this set that really makes efficient decks in sealed. So when your opponent attacks with this, they're going to get 1 card from the ability and then 1 card if you want to counter out of it minimum. So he is a resource juggernaut when it comes to whittling away your opponent. This Trafalgar Law lets you on play reveal a Supernova type character card from your hand and add to the top of your life face down, and then give a Rested Dawn card to a Supernova type leader you control. But the fact that you can just play a 7/9 and then heal 1, and the fact that a lot of the Supernovas in this set have triggers, means you're going to get some really nice value with this card. So be aware that your opponent could just slam this, go up a life, and that's going to change the tempo of the match on who's going to be able to kill the other one first, even if they don't take life from you that turn. The last thing I'm going to highlight on the same way of those secrets is this SP Newgate. This is the Edward Newgate from the starter deck that comes with an SP, so very hard to pull, but it's a 7/8 with on play, give a Rested Dawn to your leader or character, and activate main, rest this character, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 5,000 power or less. Now, this could already come down on 7 and kill a lot of things on the board that will typically be there on curve, but we have 4 reducers in this set: Smiley, Monet, Gum Gum UFO, and Mocha, that all reduce on play actively and pretty generically, with Smiley obviously being leader lock to the Punk Hazard, but if you're playing 6 Luffy, it's not. So you can definitely be in a situation, especially with this Gum Gum UFO being uncommon and the Mocha being uncommon, where this Newgate just starts popping something every single turn because you have reduction and the game just falls away from you. So just be aware this is something your opponent could do to you. It's a little more niche, but also a lot harder to get out of if you're not ready and understanding how to play out of it. The real answer being just smash into this thing immediately. Do not give them the chance to play any follow-up reduction and kill things. And that is it for my OP10 pre-release guide. If you have any more questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section down below, or you can join our Discord where you can ask me and Luke questions anytime, as well as crowdsource some answers from our community who have had tons of success with these guides in the past.